Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about all the books that I read in the month of August. So in other words, my August wrap up.
What we do here is go back.
Yeah, it was a good reading month, but I'm a little disappointed. So August was our Newts. It was the Newts Magical Readathon, and I failed. I am so sad about that, but I failed by 2 books. Just 2 books. I had to read 12 books. I only got to read 10. So here we are. And we're going to talk about all those 10 books. We're going to talk about all the subjects I passed and the ones I did not pass. So obviously, I didn't become a mind medic. That's what I was going for, was for a mind medic, but I did not make it. So there we go. This time I'm going to do it a little bit different because I usually like going from in order of which I read the books, but this time we are going to go in order of subjects, and so we can talk about the ones that I completed and did not complete. So let's start off with our charms classes. I had to do my acceptable, my exceeded expectations, and my outstandings. I passed everything for my charms, so let's get into the books that I read, which actually, this was the first book I read for the readathon as well, so in a way we're still going in order of which I read them, but not really, because we're gonna go out of order right after this. The first book that I read was Coyote Songs by Gabino Iglesias. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and this was for gorgeous cover because, I mean, look at that cover. Look at that cover. It's just so stunningly colorful and beautiful, but at the same time, it's like kind of like muted, like dark, muted, but bam, with like this burst of color. I just think it's so beautiful. This has to do with different stories and following along different characters that live on the border of Mexico, and we just follow different characters and how these lives just intertwine at one point or another. It was a very touching book, a lot of important subjects. It had this creepy, like horrible parts to it. I highly do recommend it. It's really hard for me to explain this book, number 1, because it is short, and number 2, because it's a hard subject to touch on. You know, people that live on the border, the problems that they go through, urban legends also that are on the border with ghosts and things like that. But it also touches on the subject of people trying to cross the border with the coyotes and los coyotes. So here I go again. I gave this 4 stars. Next, for my exceeded expectations, we had to read a graphic novel. Of course, it's at the bottom of the pile because why wouldn't it be? And for that, I read Paper Girls Volume 1. This was a reread for me. I actually wanted to read all of the ones that I have. I believe I have volume 1, 2, and 3, and so I wanted to reread this because I think I read this like 2 years ago maybe, or whenever it first came out. I don't remember, and I remember really liking it, but I couldn't remember the details of the actual story, so I reread it. My initial rating for this was 5 stars. I have brought it down to 4 stars. I still really liked it. I still really enjoyed it. But I don't know, it just didn't give me that 5-star feeling like apparently it did at one time. But enjoyed it. This is set in the 80s, which is really cool, so it's awesome to see all the 80s fashion in it. It's almost kind of like Stranger Things, but weirder, if that's even possible. It is very weird. It is very hard to follow at times, but we are just following these 4 girls, these 4 paper girls. They actually work the paper route, and they run into this machine, and basically it's just about time traveling. So interesting. 4 stars. Next, for my outstanding in charms was a paperback, and for that I read Off Season by Jack Ketchum. I'm conflicted with it. The first one was The Girl Next Door, and with that one I didn't give it a rating, although I loved the writing. Based on the writing, I would have given it 5 stars, but the subject matter was a little touchy, being that it was based off of a real story, and it had a lot to do with rape and and just torture, and it was a deep, heavy subject matter, so I didn't want to rate it because of that, but the writing style was definitely a 5-star. I run into the same thing with this one. This is not based on a true story, but the writing is amazing. The writing kept me going. But I found myself bored with this book. Here we follow a sister, Carla, and she is waiting for her sister and a group of friends to come and meet her in the woods in, I think it's upstate New York. And they're just gonna go and spend some time in the cabins. I believe they're working on something. So they're just meeting up there, and so she arrives first. She's taking, you know, like cleaning the cabin and doing whatever, and then her friends and her sister and her boyfriend get there. What they don't know is that there is a family of carnivores and just horrible people living near the shore, and so everything happens from there. My problem with this book is that it started off great. I mean, it started off phenomenal. But then it sort of like dwindled from there. When we encounter this family of carnivores, I just feel like we lose something. It is gory. The trigger warnings for gore, obviously. Trigger warnings for rape, for murder, for torture. Trigger warning for animal abuse. That's another thing that I normally tend to skim through the parts where there are animal abuse. Like for me, animal abuse, I can read about... As messed up as it sounds, I can read about human abuse and, you know, it doesn't affect me quite, but when it's animal abuse, it really gets to me. And I usually try to skim and measure out more or less where, you know, to continue reading. But there was just parts where it was like a little bit long and I just couldn't avoid it. And it left me really sad, and it just, you know, and that's something that's very common in the horror genre, is a lot of it has animal abuse, because normally these people that we're reading about, unless it's like a ghost story or something, they're pretty terrible people. So you tend to run into those things. So I will give you that trigger warning for animal abuse. I felt a disconnect with the story. I felt a disconnect with the characters. I honestly did not care who lived or who died. I honestly did not care for this group of a family, because they are a family. The carnivores are a family, and there's children in the group. I really did not care what was going on. So right now, I haven't rated this book yet, but right now I'm sitting at a 2-star. I thought I was going to enjoy this a little bit more, but it did not do it for me. And now we're going to go into Defense Against the Dark Arts. This is another class that I had to complete all 3 for. So for the first one, acceptables, we had to do Black Under the Dust Jacket. For that, I went with the Stormcrow because it is black underneath, but it's not just black. It is phenomenally black. Does that even make sense? Yeah, so this is the book that I read for Defense Against the Dark Arts, acceptables. Let me look to see what I put, because half of these I've forgotten already. You know how it is. So here we are dealing with storm crows. We are basically, that's the magic system that is in this book. Basically, they use crows to live their everyday life. We have different kinds of crows that help with different kinds of areas. We have water crows, wind crows, earth crows, fire crows, etc., etc. And we also have 4 kingdoms. And basically, at the beginning of the book, we have one of the kingdoms that's trying, the villain kingdom, is trying to take over all the kingdoms, and they attack the area where the crows, the rookery, where all the crows are, right on the night of a big festival where they wait for the crows to hatch, and basically the crows pick their riders and they go on to training, etc., etc. Enjoyed this so much. I really love how depression is depicted in the book. We have a pair of sisters. The queen has died, their mother has died, a bunch of people have died, they have lost all their crows in this attack, and they are left to pick up and continue with life and try to pick up the pieces. One of the sisters becomes the queen, or takes care of all of that, and the other sister, which is Thea, she is the one that has like dreamed her whole entire life of riding a crow and just becoming one of these fighters, because they're also battle crows. Her sister is a strong one. She just goes, she gets stuff done. But Thea basically just gives into her depression. She just lays down and sleeps and sleeps and sleeps, doesn't come out of her room. There are people trying to get her out and she just doesn't want to hear it. And I feel like I connected with her on that level, because that's how I get. When I get affected by something, when I'm sad, when things are going on, I just shut down and I don't want to do anything. I'm not like one of those people that just want to fight even harder when things are going. No, I'm like, I'll cower in the corner and I'll let everybody take care of what they have to take care of. And I loved seeing that depiction of depression in the book. At the end of everything, obviously, she does stand up and fight because, you know, but they do, mind you, I already told you that they did destroy all the crows and the eggs, but they end up finding one egg, and it's basically a storm crow. And so they're trying to find a way to fight a battle with this one crow. They're trying to figure out a way how to hatch it, because the way that it's hatched has only ever been done by the queen, and nobody has ever been able to witness how it hatches. So that's a really big deal through the book. This is a slow-paced YA fantasy, which is not the usual pacing for a YA fantasy, at least not any that I have read. I love YA fantasies because they go really, really quick, and I just love a fast-paced YA fantasy. This is not this. This is very slow. We really don't get any action with this book until the last 3 chapters, and that's it. But it's such a good slow burn. I loved spending time with Thea. I just liked watching her and her journey into recovery from what they went through. The love interest, it's not a really big deal in the book, but I really didn't like, I really didn't like the pairing, the love pairing in it. But as I said, it's not a really big deal because it's not a focal point of the book, so you're able to overlook that. But overall, I ended up giving this 4 stars. Next, for exceeded expectations, we had to pick the first book that came to mind, and for that, funnily enough, I picked The Drawing of the Three by Stephen King. This is just the book that I am participating in a read-along for the whole series. I believe we started in January, and I think they finished or are on the last book of the Dark Tower series, and here I am just reading book 2. The Gunslinger, which is book 1, was just so boring to me. I could not get into it. I know a lot of people love these books, but just The Gunslinger did not do it for me. So it took me a while to pick up the second book. So much better than book 1. We meet a lot more characters in this one. Basically, he is the gunslinger, Roland, he's just trying to get to the Dark Tower, and we are just following his journey. Here, I don't think this is a series. There's like 7 books if I'm not mistaken, but I feel like every book it's its own story, and there's ways of spoiling prior books. They're very minor details that you can skip in it, and really talking about the plot of this doesn't really ruin anything from the prior book. Basically here he finds these doors that he goes through. One of them takes him to 1980s America, and he comes upon this guy, Eddie Dean, a couple other characters that he basically has to unite with them and go along, and these characters have to go along with him on this journey to reach the Dark Tower. With this one, I felt very confused once again. That was one of the things from The Gunslinger also that just kept me very confused. With this one, we have sections. So part 1, part 2, part 3. I'm not sure if it has a part 4, but every time these certain parts would pop up, and I did vlog this, so I will leave it up here. Every time a different section would start, I just felt completely lost. I felt like I was finally getting a hold of the last part that I read, and I was finally understanding, and then we would just completely switch to another set of characters, another set of doors, and I was just lost. But I will say that it does wrap up nicely, and it does wrap up in a way that leaves you understanding the whole entire book. I have already read book 3, and spoiler alert, I loved that one. Book 3, The Wastelands, has to be one of my favorites, but that will come in this month's wrap up for September, so you'll see that next month. But I feel like I start liking the series a little bit more with this one. Not completely, because those confusing parts of it just left me kind of like, frustrated. But the audiobooks, at first I didn't like them, but now I'm liking them even more, and I think that's just how I'm going to continue listening to them. I'm going to continue, that's how I'm going to read them. It's just I'm going to continue listening to them because they are part of my library audiobook selection. So I'm waiting on the 4th book as we speak. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Now for O, for outstanding in Defense Against the Dark Arts, it was an English author, a book with an English author or setting. And for that, I picked Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I always like to do a Harry Potter book in these magical readathons because hello, it's a magical readathon. It's Harry Potter inspired, so I feel like you must read a Harry Potter book. I am going through my first reread of this series, and this is the 3rd book. This is my first time rereading The Prisoner of Azkaban, and I love it so much. Same rating, 5 stars. These ratings just don't change for me. I think I'll be 90 and still reading this and still giving it 5 stars. Not much to say. Harry Potter, adventure with his friends, trying to defeat the Dark Lord. And here's where we encounter Sirius Black for the first time. I love him as a character. I love the journey that we go on with Harry Potter and learning about Sirius Black and all the emotions that fall into this book. 5 stars, nothing else to say. Now we go into Muggle Studies, and for Muggle Studies, I only had to complete the acceptable and exceeded expectations. Yes. And for the first one, for acceptables, we had to read a book that had a cover with an actual photo element in it. And for that, I read The Arc to a Single Light by Tosca Lee. This is the 2nd book to The Line Between. I read that book last year. I was actually blessed to get a copy of that, an arc of that, and I got the arc of the 2nd book. This actually comes out September 17th. So be on the lookout. I loved this book just like the first one. I like the first one a little bit more, but I really did enjoy this one. Here we follow Winter again and her adventures of coming out of a cult and into this world that looks like it's going to end. There is this disease or this virus going around and it's making people crazy. And so when we start this one, they are in a silo. Because the end of the world is happening, and basically they have a certain amount of time in the silo, and after this certain amount of days the doors automatically open to the world, and just chaos. They're just waiting for this time for the doors to open. They don't know what to expect. They have lost contact with the outside world, so they don't know what's going on, and finally the doors open, but the doors actually open a day, I don't know if it's a day, 2 days, or a week early, but I know that they do open early, and it was just so good. The reason why I say I like book 1 more is because this was never ending when it came to the action. There is so much action in this book, and so much happens to Winter that at times it was tiring. It was emotionally draining, and it was physically tiring to read. That is my only complaint with this book. That could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. There's people that love an extra amount of action. If that's you, this is the book for you. But it is so fast-paced. The apocalyptic setting in this is just amazing, and we encounter some amazing characters as well. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. Be on the lookout for it, and if you haven't read The Line Between, please do so. You would not regret it. So for E, we had to read a book set in our world. For that, I chose Violet. This is another arc. This book doesn't come out till the 24th of September, so keep your eyes peeled for this. This is the same author as Kill Creek. I haven't read that yet. I actually started it, but have not been able to move forward with it. A lot of people love Kill Creek. And I will say his writing is amazing. The writing in this is phenomenal. Here we follow a mother and a daughter and their journey to basically conquer grief. Her husband, which is Sadie's dad, just recently died in a car accident, and in order to heal and to try and move on, Chris, which is Sadie's mom, decides to just grab her daughter, grab their things, and go to the home where she used to do summer vacations with her family. When she gets there, this summer home is just, it's been abandoned and it's just in shambles. And she's like, oh well, she decides, the realtor is actually like, you know, I could put you somewhere else, I could put you up somewhere else. She's still the owner, like her dad is still the owner of the property, but it just hasn't been rented out. And she's like, no, don't worry, that'll be a project of hers, is basically to redo this home, bring it back to life in a way. And so they stay there. And shortly after that, she notices that her daughter is doing a little bit better, but also acting weird, and just things that start happening in the home. I love this book, and then I didn't love this book so much. So there were times where I was reading this book that I got actual chills running up and down my spine. There are some creepy scenes. This guy knows how to write a creepy scene. But my problem with this was that it was so slow. I mean, I love a good slow burn book. It's one of my favorites. I love a character-driven book, which is what this is. But it was just like too slow for me. There was times where I was just like, okay, and I found myself skimming through parts, which I don't like skimming. That's not something I do. When I read a book, I like to read it. I found myself skimming a lot of the times. I found myself bored sometimes. So those were my problems with it. I was really looking forward to it. I love the whole point of the book, and the fact that it actually gave me chills when that's just something that doesn't happen to me in books. I loved it because of that, but the pacing just killed it for me a little bit too much. With that being said, I still gave this book 3 stars because the parts that are chilling are chilling. The parts that are creepy are creepy. So if you love a slow burn and you don't mind an extra slower pacing book, then I highly do recommend this. It is creepy. The whole storyline of it is amazing. I really did enjoy reading about their journey and everything that they encountered while they stayed at this summer home. Now we go into potions, and here are where things start going a little south. So the way that I read all my books was I read them in order. So I read all my A's first, all my E's, then all my O's. When we start getting into the E's of potions and transfiguration, I sort of start dropping the ball a little bit and I start reading O's, and that's where things just started getting out of control. So for potions, I only had to read acceptables and exceeded expectations. I did pass my acceptables. That was with your friend's favorite book, and for that I read The Nightmare Room by, I don't know, who's it by? By Chris Sorensen. I think that's how you say his name, Sorensen. Oh my gosh. I actually had this as an ebook on my Kindle, on my iPad, but on my Kindle app. This is one of my new favorites. I just loved this book so much. This is part of a duology, which is the Messy Man series. This is the first book. Ooh, I read this in less than 24 hours. And for me to read an ebook in less than 24 hours, I was hooked from beginning to end. I loved this book so much. So I highly recommend for you to just go buy it on ebook. I want this book on my bookshelf. Like, I want it on my bookshelf because I love it. Here we follow a couple, and they are basically on a trip going back to the husband's childhood town. Something's going on with the dad. They have to be there. The mom and the dad are both in like a care facility, and he has to go, and they basically have to take care of the house, or they have to take care of something of their parents. And when he goes back to his dad's house, where him and his wife are planning on staying, like they just packed up all their belongings from the city. I forget what city they were in. They just pack up all their belongings on a trailer hitch, on one of the U-Haul hitch trailer things, and they pack up their whole life and they just go. They're planning on staying on at the dad's house. But when they get there, they find out that they actually sold that house and they can't stay there. They just basically have to go in, remove everything from in there clean, and then they turn the house over to whoever it is they sold it to. And so this causes a problem because obviously they plan to move to this town, so they don't know what to do. So they rent a hotel room. Long story short, they end up finding out through the realtor company that the dad owns another piece of property. So they take them to this property, and the wife is like, yes, we'll stay here. This will be like a fixer-upper. It's like a barn house, kind of country home, barn type of looking home. And the wife is super excited. She wants to fix up the place and possibly sell it in the future, whatever. But when we start off the book, we start off with such a creepy scene where basically there's this little boy and he is having nightmares and he's yelling out in his nightmares. And the dad apparently is an abusive dad and basically comes into him. He's like, you know, I have to work, and he just treats him really bad. And he ends up punishing him, and his punishment is to go into the basement, into this little room, and that is where he like spends nights and nights and nights in punishment, because he would either have nightmares or pee on himself, just horrible things. And he would encounter very spooky things in this room, in this basement. Somehow these two storylines connect. So good. I cannot say this enough. So creepy, so good, so well written. I cannot believe that I've waited this long. I don't know if book 1 is part of Kindle Unlimited. It might be, but book 2 is part of Kindle Unlimited. So if you subscribe to Kindle Unlimited, look there first, because you might be able to read it for free or for the membership. But I highly recommend it. I want to read book 2 so bad, and I almost read it right after that, but because I was doing the newts, I was trying to really stick to my TBR. But if you haven't read The Nightmare Room, please go read it. It was amazing. Needless to say, I need to stop gushing about this book, because needless to say, I gave it 5 stars. Run, run, run and read it. And then for Potions Exceeded Expectations, I didn't read anything. I was planning on reading book 4 in Harry Potter, which is the big one, the big boy. And I just didn't have enough time to read it, so I didn't pass Potions. But moving right along to Transfiguration, we had to read a book with LGBTQ plus TQA plus rep. I'm sorry, I always get confused when I say that. And for this, I picked The Luminous Dead. Before we start, I want to say that I gave this book 3 stars. 3 stars to me is a good rating. Now, I say the rating first because I think I just went into this book with too high of expectations. Spelunking, a little bit more than spelunking, but a cave, somebody going into a cave, and a horror book. I mean, like, hello, it had all the things to make this a 5-star book. And because everybody was raving about it, and because of my, view on it, knowing the subject matter, I was like, yes, sensory deprivation, being alone in a tight space for days and hours and days and hours. And I mean, though, that is just the perfect cocktail for a perfect book. So I was disappointed. Although I gave it 3 stars, there were times where I was like, oh wow, that is creepy. I mean, you're under in a cave, and you get to the point where you start seeing things, you haven't had contact with humans, it starts playing with you, you start hallucinating, those parts of the book were so good. But then there were other parts where it was lacking. It was so repetitive. Here we follow this girl. I don't know if her name is Geyer or Gyre. I listened to this on audiobook as well, so I should know how to pronounce it, but I've already forgotten about it. I think it's Gyre. She gets accepted to go on this expedition, and basically there's people that pay people to go down into caverns and caves and go and to map out mineral deposits, and she knew the dangers of it, cave collapsing, gear malfunctioning, all these things. She knew all these dangers, but it was a nice paycheck, and she was like, okay. She got accepted and she goes into this cave, and you're just following her journey going down into this cave. But there is, as always, a catch to this particular expedition that she's going on. They are kept under surveillance or under, I don't want to say control, but they are being monitored. They have these suits and they are monitoring, somebody is monitoring these people that go into the caves and into the cavern. In this case is this girl M. And they have the ability of pumping them with medication depending on what they're going through, if they have anxiety, if they can't sleep. Their handlers basically have this ability to give them any kind of medication that they need through the suits. And so yeah, that's basically the gist of it. There's a backstory to the reason why she's down there, and she doesn't know what it is, and she's finding out all these secrets. My problem with this book was how repetitive it was, which is known. I mean, you have one setting and two characters, but this is a 400-page book on that. So I feel like it could have been a little bit shorter. There's a lot of repetitiveness. There's a lot of the same kinds of feelings from Gyre to M and M to Gyre, and the same kind of banter and the same kind of, I just feel like it was too long to be what it was about. This could have been a 5-star book easily. So one of my favorite movies ever of all time, one of them, because I have a few, is The Descent, where it's the group of girls that they go spelunking, and they go to this unmarked or unexplored cave, and they come across like these things down there. That's one of my favorite movies because you have sensory deprivation. These girls they're a group of girls, but this girl Gyre, she goes there by herself, so there's loneliness and all of that. But anyways, that's one of my favorite movies. So when I heard that there was a horror book on, you know, going into caves and stuff, I was all about it. But it did not give me what I wanted. So yeah, and then I didn't complete my E for Transfiguration, so that was 2 books I didn't read. I am happy that I read 10 books though, so not so bad. He looks out the window and just growls at people. Isn't he friendly? That was everything that I read for the month of August. 10 books. Sounds like a score to me, and I read a total of 3,584 pages because I started keeping track of the pages that I read per day, and it totaled to almost 3,600 pages, so not bad. I always love doing the magical readathons because it just gives you a chance to push yourself to read a little more than you usually do. So yeah, really did enjoy it. Let me know if you participated in the newts, if you passed, if you failed, and also what your favorite book of the month was. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye! Not too many bloopers in this one, so I don't know what I'm gonna put at the end. Hey guys, welcome back. Really, there I go with the really-reallys. No really-reallys. Just one really, no really-reallys. And let's just try to do that, Marcella, okay? Okay. This is the second